buckle up, listener, because today we're diving into, like, the book of Revelation.
Ooh, okay.
But, and hold your apocalyptic horses, we're not talking the usual fire and brimstone stuff. You sent us an article about the 144,000.
Yes.
And, like, this theory is, it's next level stuff.
It's definitely a fascinating take on a passage that's been debated for centuries.
Okay, so for those of us who haven't, like, memorized Revelation,
Right.
remind us, what's the big deal with this number? Why 144,000?
So in Revelation, the 144,000 are depicted in heaven with Christ. They're sealed by God, and they seem to have a specific role in the end times, and this has led to a lot of speculation about who they might be.
Right, like some people think it's about the rapture, or certain groups claim it's literally about them,
Mm-hmm.
but this article goes in a totally different direction.
Totally. Yeah, it's a very different direction.
So,
It presents this fascinating thought experiment, like an interpretation that, while not officially doctrine, it does align with Scripture in a really intriguing way.
all right, you got my attention.
Right.
Spill the beans. Who does this article say the 144,000 really are?
Get this, they link it to the massacre of the Holy Innocents, the infant boys killed under King Herod after Jesus' birth.
Whoa, 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 hold on.
Yeah.
That's quite a connection to make. How on earth did they get there?
So the article really focuses on Revelation 7.3 to 4, which describes the sealing of 144,000 people from the 12 tribes of Israel. And they argue that because this sealing seems super important for the events of Revelation to unfold, it implies it had to happen before Jesus was even born.
Hold on. So if the sealing happened before Jesus' birth, wouldn't that completely change how we usually think about the timeline of Revelation?
That's exactly what this article is suggesting,
Wow.
and it's where the Holy Innocents come in.
Okay.
The article proposes that we think of Revelation as this epic retelling of Jesus' life, but from heaven's point of view.
Oh, have you ever considered that before? That Revelation is like, it's like this celestial recap, right, of events we usually only see from an earthly angle. That's wild.
It's a fascinating concept to consider, for sure.
Yeah.
So, if we're looking at things from heaven's perspective, think about it. The Holy Innocents, they're already up there when Revelation goes down.
Okay.
But there's even more to it.
Okay.
Revelation 14.3 to 5 describes the 144,000 as without fault, redeemed, first fruits, virgins, and undefiled by women.
Okay.
And the article argues that these descriptions could line up with the Holy Innocents.
Okay, I see where they're going with this, but break it down for me. How do those specific words, how do they connect to those infants?
Okay, so let's start with without fault.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how we view babies. Pure, innocent. It makes sense to think of them as inherently blameless.
Right.
They haven't had a chance to make any bad choices.
You know what? Thinking back to when my niece was born, she really did have this, like, aura of pureness about her. It was like a direct line to something bigger than all of us, you know?
Exactly. And the virgins part also fits in this context.
Right.
Now, I know redeemed might seem a little contradictory.
Yeah.
If they're innocent, why do they need redeeming?
That's a really good point.
So the article suggests a couple possibilities. Maybe it's like a baptism by blood, their martyrdom washing away original sin. Or it could be connected to Christ's descent into Hades after his death on the cross.
Right.
Some believe that he offered redemption to those who died before his ministry, and the Holy Innocents would fit into that.
So their deaths could be seen as like a form of redemption themselves, especially since Herod was trying to kill Jesus.
Right.
It's like they are the first martyrs for Christ.
Exactly.
That's intense.
And that leads us to the next description.
Ah.
First fruits.
Okay, I'm seeing how that fits in. First fruits always makes me think about those farmers markets where they have like the first harvest of the season,
Right.
the best of the best.
Yeah, it's a powerful image, right? And in Hebrew tradition, those first and best, they were offered up to God.
Right.
So the article suggests that the Holy Innocents, as the very first martyrs for Christ, represent that ultimate sacrifice.
Wow, it's like their loss, as awful as it was, it takes on this whole other layer of significance when you look at it from that angle.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, but also like incredibly profound at the same time.
It really highlights the mystery and the depth of faith, doesn't it?
For sure. But something I'm curious about, the Gospels mention different numbers for how many infants were killed.
Right.
Doesn't that like poke some holes in this whole 144,000 idea?
You bring up a good point. It's true. Different traditions give different numbers.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, the article points out that the Coptic Church specifically claims there were 144,000 infants killed.
No way.
Yeah.
Even if they don't connect it directly to Revelation, that's a pretty mind-blowing coincidence.
Yeah, it is.
Speaking of Revelation, this whole interpretation is really making me rethink those verses. But does any of this actually change how we're supposed to understand the 144,000?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the article is careful to point out that this is just one way of looking at it. It's not official doctrine or any. However, it's worth noting that the church does hold the holy innocents in high regard.
Okay.
We commemorate them, remember their sacrifice. And while that doesn't automatically prove this theory is right,
Right.
it does show that those infants have this special place in Christian tradition.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like
Yeah.
the church is saying, hey, this is worth thinking about, not don't even go there.
Exactly.
Sure.
And this is what I find so exciting about theology. It's about engaging in these thought-provoking discussions. It's about looking for a deeper meaning, appreciating the complexity of faith.
I love that. It reminds me of that quote, the Bible isn't a book you read cover to cover and then put on a shelf. It's a field you wander in, discovering new beauty and truth every time.
What a beautiful image.
Right.
And this interpretation, with its focus on the 144,000 and this possible connection to the holy innocents, it really exemplifies that. It's about being willing to dig a little deeper,
Yeah.
to ask those what-if questions,
Yeah.
even with the most familiar passages.
Absolutely. And sometimes those what if questions, they lead to some seriously awe-inspiring realizations. It's funny, before we started this whole deep dive, I kind of saw Revelation as this puzzle, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's one right answer about who the 144,000 are. We just had to find it.
Right.
But now, I don't know, I'm realizing it's way more nuanced than that.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just about decoding a secret message,
Right.
but about grappling with really profound theological concepts.
Yeah.
This interpretation, even if we don't take it literally,
Right.
it forces us to confront some big questions
For sure.
about redemption, martyrdom, even what it means to be in heaven.
It's like it's less about finding all the answers and more about just asking the right questions, you know?
Exactly.
And then seeing where they lead.
For example, if we entertain this idea that these infants are part of this special group in Revelation, it makes you think about everyone else in heaven too.
Oh.
What roles do they play in God's plan? What does it mean to be part of that communion of saints? It opens up like a world of imagination about the afterlife.
Yeah, it really does. It's like this whole other level of the story that we usually just kind of, I don't know, we skip over it. And you know what else really stuck with me from this?
Yeah.
The idea that Revelation could be this retelling of Jesus's life, but from heaven's perspective. That's huge. It's like we're being asked to look beyond, our limited human understanding of things.
It's a profound thought, isn't it? It's easy to get caught up in the historical context of the Bible,
Right. Yeah.
to forget that there's this whole other dimension to it.
Right. Yeah.
This interpretation reminds us to step back, consider the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the eternal significance of these events.
It's like we need to be reading the Bible with our spiritual antenna up or something.
I love that. Yeah.
Looking for those deeper layers of meaning that might not be obvious at first glance.
I love that analogy. And honestly, that's valuable for anyone engaging with these texts.
Yeah, right.
Whether they're, a biblical scholar or just starting to explore their faith.
Well said. This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for coming on.
I did too. It was fun.
Listener, we hope this deep dive into the mystery of the 144,000 has inspired you to look at these familiar stories in a whole new light. Don't be afraid to ask the big questions,
Yeah.
to explore different perspective.
Have fun with it.
Exactly. And who knows, you might just uncover some incredible insights of your own. Until next time, keep those deep dives going.